what we need to be doing is you go into a shoe store, you try on 6, 7, 8, 9 different pairs of shoes, you go run on them. The research tells us you should only judge them by how they feel when you're actually doing the activity that you're going to use them for. So if you're walking in them, judge them how they feel when you're walking. If you're going to buy them for running, don't judge them how they feel when they're walking, judge them by how they feel when you're running. And so go out there and do that and pick the shoe that makes you feel the most like house slippers, the most barefoot, relaxed, and free.
Welcome to Healthy Living. Today we're going to have an interview with Golden Harper. He's the founder of Ultra Shoes, which is a brand of anatomic shoes that we frequently recommend to our patients. He's an avid runner, outdoor enthusiast, and he's had a couple of really good marathons starting when he was 12. So Golden, welcome to the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Stoked to be here.
And so tell me a little bit about your background. You come from a family of runners, and then you kind of were interested in this whole natural movement. And so tell me a little bit.
Yeah, so I actually come from a family of converted runners. So none of my family or my parents' families were active or really into exercise or anything. So when we show up to family reunions, people are kind of like, "Oh, who are the skinny people?" So my parents both, at different times got into running and changed their entire life and lifestyle and everything about it. And when I was born, they were putting on like 30 races a year. And so, and my parents were new to running at the time. So you could say the stoke level for running was very high.
Yeah.
When I was a baby and a kid. So I grew up around it. And then we opened a shoe store when I was 9. My dad actually worked for Nike and then for Saucony. And then we opened a shoe store when I was 9, specialty running and walking store. And I started working there at age 9, started getting left there alone at age 10. And I was also doing, my own crazy running adventures at the same time. And that eventually just led to my lifelong passion for trying to help people, fix people that, were hurt. And, it's crazy because in a shoe store, you see a lot of people that they come in with their orthotics and they throw them in the garbage. And they say, I've been to 3 doctors. They haven't been able to help me. What do you got?
Yeah.
And so that kind of led me down, part of my path, along with just realizing that, everything we do in the shoe store environment, there's not a lot of science behind a ton of it. There's no real great training where there is science. There's not good, as much synchrony as we would like with the medical community. Those were things that I wanted to bring to my shoe store environment, was a science-backed, research-backed way of helping people. Almost in a clinical, type of way of doing things. So that's a little bit of my background.
That's pretty awesome. So they left you there when you were 10, and what did you find with the traditional shoe gear that was out there? There must have been something that kind of frustrated you or wasn't complete.
Well, yeah, I mean, everybody comes in, for the most part, most people go into a specialty shoe store to buy shoes because something hurts. Something's off, something's not quite right, something's painful, something along those lines. And I just wanted to be the best I could be at being able to help those people. I mean, they're there because they're suffering. They're there because they're uncomfortable. And just like kind of doing the slap it together, well, here's what the shoe companies tell me to say kind of thing, just seemed pretty disingenuous to me.
Okay.
And after 10 years of being in that environment, that's why when I went off to college, it was like, I'm going to take the foot health and running shoe major, and I basically took every, I spent 9 years. It took me 9 years to graduate college with a 4-year degree because I was just, even in English, I was writing my 15-page final English paper on how to engineer natural uneven surfaces to reduce injury rates in runners and walkers. So this was just kind of the approach I took in college, was like, and frankly, I was managing the shoe store half the time I was in college too. So I'm like working 35 hours a week, I'm going to school full time, and I'm studying, foot health and running injuries the whole time. And frankly, planning on trying to be either a podiatrist or a physical therapist or something along those lines.
Yeah. So I'm assuming, you took a different route, but you've been able to affect so many, probably more people even than you could have as a podiatrist. You can affect one at a time, but you can affect hundreds of people at a time now with the shoe company. So how did it lead into a shoe company?
Yeah, yeah. No, I mean, your point is true. So what happened with me is I did my I want to say internships, and I just was like, I want to work with athletes, and I went and interned with what were supposedly sports, some of the better sports doctors in the area, and it was still like not that many athletes, and I was like, so that kind of is how I got out of that path. I thought maybe I can do something bigger. And even at the local level, maybe I can, I get to see, probably 30 to 40 people a day in my shoe store. You're not going to get to see that many athletes as a doctor.
Yeah.
Uh, and so, and a lot of these people are, like I said, kind of past their doctors, which is unfortunate, or maybe the doctors just need to be better. Not everybody runs into a top-notch doctor, So, as I got studying everything, I actually spent a couple of years out in Hawaii, and that just blew up my whole worldview of what things were. I grew up as a kid in the 90s. I was like a gearhead shoe geek, whatever, however you want to say it. And I was obsessed with running shoes. And everything we're taught is like, and you probably went through a lot of this too, is like flat feet are instantly bad. If people pronate, that's terrible. All this stuff. And I get out to Hawaii and I'm surrounded by giant people walking around in slippers, if they have that on. A lot of them are just walking around bare feet everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm horrified. I'm like, I've been sent to help these people. It's like,
Everyone's
I'm going to fix them.
Shoes. We're going to make
yeah,
them
I'm going to put great shoes on them. I'm going to get them the shoes we sell at our store, and I'm going to help fix their problems. And as I got to know all of these Hawaiians, it was like, I get to know them well enough to ask them more personal questions like, hey, so I'm really into helping people out with their feet problems. Tell me about your foot pain. And I'm talking to a 350-pound person that walks around bare feet or in slippers all day. They're clearly large, and they're always like, nothing hurts, bro. I'd be like, nah, come on, it's okay. You can tell me. This is what I do. And they're like, no, bro, nothing hurts. And it's just like, okay, like, so that rocked my worldview. And at the same time, I've started to run barefoot on the beach a ton.
Mm-hmm.
And really enjoy that. And I'm injury free for the first time in my collegiate running career as well.
Wow.
And all this stuff comes together, and I'm doing all this research at the same time. And I'm finding like all this stuff that I was told by shoe companies to tell people, there was no scientific backing for it. We don't have clear research saying that overpronation causes injuries.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, 198 out of 203 studies in the last 25 years say, no, there's no connection there, so at best, there's maybe a slight connection. And same goes for most of the things that I had been taught to tell people, at my running store or by shoe companies or whatever. And that's when the bullcrap meter starts to go off, and you start to say, there's got to be a better way. Let's dive into the research. Let's see what the papers say, and let's find a better way to help people.
Now, this is some great stuff for those that are listening, Golden. And probably most of our people are going to be people that either buy their own shoes, or they might go to a specialty shoe store that we have locally, and maybe they want to be taught or give some resources about just whole natural movement. If they've never heard about the word natural movement or natural technique, I'm going to give them your link, of course, but explain a little bit about what that means.
Well, I think, in its most basic sense, it's just moving the way people have moved throughout all history until recently. If you look at any video of anybody running, for example, like 1960s, they move a certain way, and people don't move that way anymore. And what happened in the 60s is we got shoes with elevated cushioned heels, and we got shoes. Combo that with the tapered toe box that is already popular in shoes, and all of a sudden the foot can't really move right, and the body starts moving differently. And when I say watch any film, I'm not saying just like watch runners or watch the Olympics. I'm saying like watch Gone with the Wind, watch any old movie and watch people run. People before the 60s don't run the way people run today. Shoes have literally changed the way we run by the way they're built. And most people don't know this, but 99% of all shoes out there have a heel that's twice as high as the forefoot. In most cases, the midsole, the cushioning level of the shoe, the cushioning is twice as thick in the heel as it is in the forefoot. It's also a lot heavier in the back. And so this affects the way the foot moves through the gait cycle. It affects where the foot lands. So an elevated heel is going to make your foot land more out in front of your knee instead of underneath your knee. A heavier heel is going to make you dorsiflex more, or pop your toes up in the air and put your heels more towards the ground. These are things that your body would never naturally do without a shoe on. And so that is probably at the most basic. That's what's going on. And so it's really just this idea of getting our bodies back to doing something that they are, meant to do and what they have done for eons. And
now, in your opinion, Golden, can someone just basically change their shoe and everything else will be fixed? Or I know we've talked about, or correct toes or physical therapy work or body movement. Is it all necessary? What are the kind of the steps when you talk to someone? Let's say they come into your store. Maybe not now. I don't know if you're still seeing the patients that come in and say, hey, besides the Ultra shoes I'm going to try, what's the next step that you recommend for them? Or is usually just the shoes enough?
See, and to me, I'm probably a horrible salesman because I'm going to say that teaching people technique is more important than the shoes. The shoes are important, but honestly, people have spent a lifetime in shoes with elevated cushioned heels and tapered toe boxes. So those habits aren't going to change immediately. So just changing the shoes might work over a several year period as they get out of elevated cushioned heels and tapered toe boxes, but that's slower than we want to affect things. I look at the shoes part as more of like, it's like a coach in a box. You give them a pair of shoes that is correct, that is level from heel to forefoot, that doesn't change what their body naturally wants to do. And that's going to make it easier to do what's right. But if you really want to accelerate the process, if you're tired of hurting, then, for me, it's as simple as just giving people a lesson on how to walk naturally, how to run naturally. And it's really 4 simple steps. It's not complicated, and, it can be done pretty easily.
That's awesome. And that must make you feel so happy to be able to help people that way,
Oh, for sure. Yeah. And I mean, I get my biggest juice, if you will, just from people calling, writing, texting, posting reviews like, hey, the technique you taught me or the shoes that you sell combined with the technique that they promote has changed my life. My plantar fasciitis is no longer an issue. My shin splints are gone. My runner's knee is not a big issue. My IT band is not a problem anymore, or my lower back doesn't hurt, something along those lines. That's really for me, the thing that's most important about what I'm doing.
Yeah, and for everyone that's watching that's curious, we're going to put the link here. It's goldenharper.net. You can learn a lot about these techniques that we talked about, or that he's going to be talking about there. So let's move on now to the technique and everything else like that. People are going to work on. They have to maybe get some help with a podiatrist. You need to look for a kind of a natural, holistic type of a podiatrist, and maybe a physical therapist, like you said, maybe a massage therapist. I think they all kind of work together. Then let's go into talking about a shoe. Why another shoe? Were there no other shoes that you agreed with?
Yeah. So why did I create Ultra? Yeah. It was the last thing I wanted to do. You don't just go start a shoe company. It's I had been actually experimenting on shoes, and I had more or less created Ultras. And it had been a year since I'd done it. We'd been experimenting, testing them at the store. We'd actually sold about 1,000 pair of modified, what we called at the time, 0 drop, shoes that we would expand the toe box on. And my cousin Jeremy, he's just like, I had got him a pair, and he's able to run for the first time in 5 years without his knee hurting. And he's like, hey, I need you to get me a real pair. And I'm like, they're real, and he's like, well, no, not made by you, that come this way. And I was like, do you think I'd be hacking up shoes, in my basement with a freaking toaster oven, or using the shoemaker guy down the street if they existed, And he's like, you mean to tell me that there are no athletic shoes on the market that allow your toes to spread out naturally the way they're supposed to, and keep your heel and your forefoot level with the ground. Basically like the same position you are barefoot is the same position you would be in the shoe. There's no shoes that don't take your foot out of its natural barefoot position, and still have cushioning. I was like, nope, doesn't exist, no such thing. He could not believe it, So he goes and searches the world and comes back and he's like, they don't exist. I'm like, yeah, I know. I manage a shoe store, like, you know, um, and but we've had the same 7 big running shoe companies since the beginning of running shoe time, basically. And really, like, starting a running shoe company historically has been the quickest way to go homeless. It just is, like, you don't
Compete with the big guys.
Nobody's done it. Nobody's broke through before, but it really was something I felt like we had the data behind, we had the research. I felt like there's a lot of scientific backing behind it. And we had a year's worth of 1,000 customers, injury data to prove it with insanely high success rates. So Jeremy finds these guys, and I get a call from this guy that was like the last maker and the head of the kitchen at Nike, and he calls up, and I think I'm getting sued. It's like there's this guy calling me from Nike, and I don't understand that he's already left Nike. And it's like, oh no, we're finally getting sued. I knew this day would come. And he's like, no, it's cool. Like, I'm not with Nike anymore. I work with this guy, Gary. He was a VP of development at Adidas. He left at Adidas. We've known for 15 years that shoes are supposed to be built the way you've been prototyping shoes at your store. And I was like, okay, I'm listening. And he's like, well, I'm like, why are you calling me? Like, you guys know how to build shoes. Like, and he says to me, he's like, well, we don't understand the running shoe industry or the specialty shoe market. And we don't really have a marketing story. We're just like old guys that, sit in the dungeon and build shoes, basically. And so let's get together. And so we take this road trip up to Vancouver, Washington, Portland area, and meet with these guys. And, it's a whirlwind. The next thing I know, we're $1 million in debt, and really here we are today. So pretty crazy.
Wow.
But yeah, it was nuts. So.
What a story. I love that. That's a great story. And so since then, I have multiple pairs. My kids wear them. Everyone kind of wears them that comes into our office, where we always give a couple of recommendations, and people that are willing to wear them. I think one of the biggest challenges is changing even the motif in people's mind. Females,
oh, for sure.
You're going to feel better in these. And I would say the bulk of my time is spending telling people about shoes. You can make them better a lot. And the people that come with the 3 bags of shoes and say, none of these fit.
Yeah.
Let's go, Golden, and talk a little bit about, now let's dive deep into kind of running injury, your passion, running shoes. What are a couple of the myths that people may think are true, but they're really not, and how you can refute them?
Yeah, so the big ones that I like to focus on are kind of what I call the big 4 in the running world, things that I grew up lying to people, not on purpose, but telling people about, probably every day for 15 years of my life, if not longer. So, the first is, I already mentioned, was pronation. You go into a running shoe store and, chances are the wall is arranged by whether shoes control pronation, quote unquote, or, guide pronation, or whatever it happens to be. And luckily that paradigm is finally starting to change. And I feel like we've done a lot of work at Ultra to really get that research out there and shine a spotlight on the fact that, there's not really a clear line saying that pronation causes injuries. And it's pretty ridiculous that we have an entire shoe industry set up to essentially sell shoes based on whether you pronate or, over pronate or not. And, it's different if we're talking about somebody that might have a drop navicular, or that like 1% of people who has some sort of genetic deformity. But the reality is, the research tells us that people are least injured in the shoe that they are most comfortable in. And it's so prominent in the research that researchers refer to it as the comfort filter in all these studies. And so really putting a focus on comfort instead of on pronation, I think is a huge thing, and getting rid of this myth that if I overpronate, I need a stability shoe. Mm-hmm. And it turns out, if you look at Reed Ferber's Green Runner study, which is the largest study in the history of running injuries, he finds that there's still about 13% of people that are less injured while wearing a stability shoe, so a shoe that accounts for quote unquote overpronation, But 85+% are least injured wearing a shoe that, I quote, doesn't try to change what the body wants to do at all. Essentially just the shoe gets out of the way and lets the body do its thing as naturally as possible. And interestingly enough, though, with those 13% of people that are less injured while pronating, or while wearing a stability shoe, about half of those people don't overpronate. So these are neutral runners that, for whatever reason, they're less injured while wearing a stability shoe. I think that's fascinating. That's exciting. That just tells me, like, what we need to be doing is you go into a shoe store, you try on 6, 7, 8, 9 different pairs of shoes, you go run on them. The research tells us you should only judge them by how they feel when you're actually doing the activity that you're going to use them for. So if you're walking in them, judge them how they feel when you're walking. If you're going to buy them for running, don't judge them how they feel when they're walking, judge them by how they feel when you're running. And so go out there and do that and pick the shoe that makes you feel the most like house slippers, the most barefoot, relaxed, and free, with whatever cushion level is, appropriate for what kind of activity you're doing. So you're running a 100-mile ultra marathon, your feet are probably going to get the crap kicked out of them. Probably go with more cushioning. If you're just, around the neighborhood doing a half mile, just going on short walks, you probably don't need any cushioning at all. Frankly, I walk around my neighborhood barefoot, and my neighbors are like, hey, didn't you start a shoe company? I'm like, the whole point of my shoes is that I can do this. Like, my shoes allow my feet to become strong and have the ability to do what feet have been meant to do throughout, the ages. So that's the first one, is the pronation one. Just this idea that overpronation causes injuries or we need stability shoes to fix it. It's just not true.
Mm-hmm.
I think the second one, that's probably the biggest one that people don't realize, is if you really dive into the literature, what we find is with cushioning. And if I ask people, cushioning will save your, what are people going to say? What is every one of your patients going to say when I say cushioning will save your?
Save your foot, basically save your arthritis, save
your joints, save your knees.
Oh yeah,
I think
save your joints. Like, and there's a certain brand that's out there now. They say it's going to save your knees and things like that. That is a double the cushion.
Yeah. So, and if I call this out in a big crowd, like, I get this chorus of knees and joints back, because that's the way running shoe marketing has worked for 50 years now, is our cushioning will save your joints or your knees. And, they say it really indirectly, but creative ways to get around getting sued. But regardless, that's the marketing message.
Mm-hmm.
If you dive into the literature and you look at the research, not only has no research ever shown that cushioning protects joints in any way, research shows emphatically that the more heel on a shoe is, the more cushioning there is in the heel of the shoe, the more it actually puts pressure on the joints. So it increases joint torques, it increases, impact forces,
Mm-hmm.
it increases the impact quotient rate. I mean, you name it, adding cushioning puts pressure on the joints. It does, however, or it has been shown in the research to protect the foot and lower leg. So I think this idea of using cushioning appropriately is really important for people to understand. And that's where I like to derive this myth, is like, hey, you don't want to be using cushioning if your knees hurt or your hips hurt or your low back hurts. The research would tell us that's going to backfire. It's going to do just the opposite.
Mm-hmm.
However, if you've got like an Achilles issue, or you're getting super sore soleus, or your plantar fascia is flared up, or you've got a neuroma, or a fifth met stress fracture or something like that, then cushioning is going to protect those areas. And my view, of course, is we want to add cushioning without deforming the foot out of its natural position, meaning apply the cushioning equally across the bottom of the shoe, keep the heel and forefoot the same distance. So I think that's a big one for people to understand from an injury standpoint, is use your cushioning depending on where you're hurting or where your weaknesses tend to be, or what kind of activity you're doing. Protection is different depending on the activity. Short runs on the road don't require much cushioning. Short runs on grass don't require any cushioning. Running 100 miles on rocky, nasty terrain probably requires a lot of cushioning to overcome the foot fatigue, and a lot of rock protection to overcome getting beaten up by the rocks. So I think we could do so much with this conversation to help people, and we'd see so many less injuries if people could just apply this. And it's really just this simple. Cushioning will help your feet and lower legs in the short term, take pressure off an area. It will also get those weaker, so you want to use less cushioning to strengthen those areas. However, cushioning will not help your joints. So So that's the second one. I'll be brief with the other two. The third one is
great.
Okay, good. The other next one's probably my favorite is the foot one, and just this idea of of where do foot problems come from, and people really don't have any idea. But if you actually dive into the literature here and you look at these researchers that have gone into look at, there's almost 1 billion people on the planet that don't wear modern footwear. They walk around barefoot or in primitive sandals. And when we actually go and when we go and look at these people, it's fascinating. They don't have any of the same foot problems we have.
Yeah, that's like Ross.
In fact,
yeah.
Yeah. So if you look at Rossi's stuff, Schumann, whoever, it's just mind blowing to see like these people have never heard of plantar fasciosis or what we used to call plantar fasciitis. They don't know what bunions or neuromas are. These things that are just common foot issues that we see every day, all day, are non-existent among these populations of people. And in fact, if you look in America, according to the APMA, surveys, 73% of us report foot pain every year in America. So almost 3 out of 4 adults in America report foot pain every year. That's not like it's dragged out of them. It's I went into a doctor's office, a shoe store, or fill out a survey that said my feet hurt and I'm here to talk about it. Okay. Now we go to those billion people on the planet that don't wear modern shoes, and we get 3% have any kind of foot pain whatsoever. And it's almost all acute, meaning I stubbed my toe on a sharp rock, I dropped something heavy on myself, or I got a fungus. It's not the same type of debilitating, lifelong, months, years, et cetera, kind of foot pain that we have. And I find that fascinating. And when you really look at it, the answer here is that foot problems are caused by shoes deforming your foot out of its natural position. Almost period. 98% of all foot problems are caused by your shoes deforming your foot out of its natural position. This is just something people have never thought about before. But, we're taking our feet that are relatively square shaped and we shove them into shoes that are shaped like triangles. And we wonder why our feet hurt. And we do this all day, every day. Not only are, we doing that, but we're elevating the heel. We're completely deforming the bone structure of the foot in a way that it can't work. The arch can't even work in a traditional shoe, which is why we need arch supports. For thousands of years, humans did just fine without arch supports. But then we put elevated cushioned heels in shoes, and we have tapered toe boxes. The arch can't work anymore, and all of a sudden you need arch support. And I completely agree with that. If you're going to put on a modern shoe, which is 98% of all shoes out there that have a tapered toe box and elevated heel, you better put arch support in, because your arch isn't capable of working in that situation. However, if you can keep your foot in its natural position, your foot's going to do just fine, just as it did for billions of people throughout all of human history until recently.
And I'm sure you can speak to this too, Golden, but you take that and then you put people, sit them down 8 hours or 12 hours a day in front of a computer, tightness of the muscles and everything else added on to that, right? It just kind of adds insult to
insult. It's a nightmare. Yeah, absolutely. No question.
Let's go to the fourth one.
The idea.
Go ahead.
Fourth one is pretty simple, just surfaces. I think people have this idea like, oh, if I run on a soft surface or walk on a soft surface, like things will be better. But the highest injury rates we find are actually on tracks and treadmills. They're both soft. And it just goes back to, this is another aspect of natural movement that really has nothing to do with shoes. But it's just this idea of like, go out and do things with your body that your body was intended to do. Go walk on natural, uneven surfaces. I like to do what I call the park run. You just run to the closest park to your house and take a lap on the grass. And then you run to the elementary school and take a lap on the grass. And then you find some dirt trail next to the road. And, you just find creative ways, use your eyes, and find natural surfaces for your body to go on. This keeps your muscle structure in harmony. Most injuries, both walking and running injuries, are muscle imbalance injuries at the end of the day. People like to think they're overuse injuries, but they're only overuse in that they've created a muscle imbalance. And once we can get the hips tilting, that's good. So I tell people, step off curbs, step in potholes, duck under trees on purpose, do anything you can to get your hips tilting. This is going to move your muscle structure through a pattern that is going to get you back in balance and is going to get rid of your injuries. And I mean, this is critical for things like IT band and stuff like that. So, but yeah, you look at surfaces out there, and it's the consistency of the surface that causes the problem. So when every step is the same, that really messes up our muscles. Our bodies humans are just not meant to take every step the same. So any variation you can provide is great. The softness doesn't matter. Remember 20 years ago, treadmills used to all be rock hard, and then they got cushion padded decks, and all the marketing was like, treadmills are soft now, your injuries are going to go away. We look at injury rates in treadmills then versus now, nothing has happened. Yeah. It didn't change. The body's just like, okay, the surface is softer, we're just going to keep the legs stiffer now when we land. Our bodies are awesome. They're incredibly adaptable. And, when you land on a soft surface or a soft shoe, the leg just stays stiffer. You land on a firm surface or a firm shoe, the leg just bends more and uses that big 3-foot spring if you're in position to do it, meaning if you're moving naturally, landing underneath the bent knee. So it's pretty cool how adaptable our bodies are.
Wow. Well, and then when I was looking at, and people can learn this if they go to your website, but you also talk about working on the intrinsic muscles, strengthening intrinsic. That's kind of beyond the scope here. Once again, I'd like others to research more about you, Golden. If they want to learn more about you or your company, what are a couple of good websites they can go to?
So I think if you, obviously ultrarunning.com, if you're interested in the shoes, but correcttoes.com, they have just a wealth of information and resources there, as well as the Healthy Foot Alliance. The work that the Healthy Foot Alliance is doing, this is a group of clinicians, natural movement educators, and people in the foot health industry that have come together. So the Healthy Foot Alliance is something to look up on social media as well, and that's just going to grow as well. But there's a wealth of information between there and like I said, the Correct Toes website, Ultra website, and whatnot.
Cool. Well, thank you so much for your time. Your wealth of knowledge. It was a great time speaking with you. And if anyone wants more information, on the bottom of this video, I'll put these links. Okay. Thank you, Golden.
Awesome. Thanks a lot.
Hey guys, thank you for watching Healthy Living. You're going to find a few links here I'd like you to click. One is to subscribe to this channel on YouTube. Also, you can learn more. There are some videos here you can see.